No worries. Cheers, Tim. Okay, thanks for everybody joining and persevering. Apologies for the technical difficulties. So, we're going to have a brief look at January diets or New Year's diets and versus performance nutrition, and have a look at what some of the pitfalls are. So, this nice lads are moving on. Oh, there we go. Cool. Can you guys see that? Okay. Okay, so we'll start by looking at some of the pitfalls of cool of January diets, and then we'll have a look at why sustainable nutrition and nutrition support works better for active individuals and athletes. There is something of a delay. Apologies. January diet. Why are January diets so bad then? Well, January tends to be the busiest time of the year for one of the worst for active individuals and athletes particularly. And I think most people on this call will have specific training goals, race goals, and some may even want to lose a little bit of weight. So we need energy and we need consistency to support those three aims, not with New Year's diets. Now, quick question. Given the technical difficulties, I don't expect anybody to try and answer, but just have a think to yourself. How many of you have started the new year at some point and decided you're going to go on a diet? And what was a little bit of weight that you put on over Christmas and get back on track before early spring season races? Or was it because you decided you're going to just eat healthier in the coming year? And then ask yourself, did you manage to see even to the end of January? As an example, a lot of people are doing dry January at the minute, and some people may be successful, but a lot of people will struggle around week 2 and week 3. And the chances are that's not because of motivation. We're all active, we're all athletes, so motivation is generally not an issue for us. Chances are it was more the approach that we've taken. That's because New Year diets frequently focus on either extreme calorie restriction or fad diet trends, and in some cases, even just cutting out entire food groups altogether without any real evidence based rationale for doing so. And this is partly driven by the misconception that rapid weight loss equals improved health and performance, and that all calories and food types impact the body. However, the body for that relatively short 4 6 week window across Christmas and New Year is going to have any kind of meaningful impact on both our health, weight, and performance. Reality is it's not what we do for that short couple of weeks over Christmas have any impact. But I think part of that is this misunderstanding and overlook in supporting athlete performance and recovery and weight loss, and also the fact that consistency beats perfection every time. You can eat perfectly and you can exercise perfectly every day in January, but ultimately, if we can't maintain this throughout the rest of the year, then it's largely irrelevant what you do over that 4 week period. It's not going to have any impact. If you can sustain something long term, then that's going to have far bigger benefits. So the reality is around 80% of these New Year extreme type diets don't tend to last beyond the end of January and mid February at the latest. And that's due to these unrealistic expectations of severe food restriction and also a lack of personalization. It's not specific to your particular situation. So, if it's not motivation, then why do these diets tend to fail? Well, I think initially these quick fix diets do generate short term results, certainly over the first couple of weeks at least. But that's often due to simple water loss as a result of restricting eating. Something that we need to bear in mind is that for every gram of carbohydrate that we eat, the body produces around 3 grams of water to help metabolize that. So it kind of stands to reason that if we if we severely restrict food intake, then the body will naturally produce less water. So the drop off in weight that we see initially with these type of diets is generally water loss and not from fat. These type of extreme diets also trigger adaptive responses, particularly a reduction in resting energy expenditure, which makes it harder for the body to burn calories. And therefore, over several weeks, particularly when we start to get to the back end of this January phase, early February phase, that can result in a positive energy balance and that weight gain. Try and lose weight loss, then it makes that weight loss process even harder because the body is essentially trying to preserve energy because you're not feeding enough. And this aggressive nature of food restriction also increases hormone imbalance. So we get a significant increase in our hunger hormone ghrelin, but at the same time, we get ultimately the brain gets these conflicting messages and it thinks it's been starved and then tries to regain those lost calories and ultimately leads to energy deficits, potential craving for poor foods, and that characteristic rapid weight rebound that we see with these sort of aggressive diets. Another reason why they tend to fail is we can't ignore the psychological impacts of these type of diets. So New Year diets generally promote an all or nothing mindset. And when we do fail, and I use the term fail loosely, but when we do have something that is perceived as bad for that particular diet, then there's often feelings of guilt. And because of that all or nothing mindset, it's often a case of, well, I've succumbed to temptation now. I might as well just go all in and just carry on eating as I was before and forget the diet. But let's be clear for a second. There are no foods that are inherently bad for us. Okay. Generally speaking, overconsumption of particular foods is the issue. So there's no real reason for us to completely eliminate any foods from our diet, aside from if there's any kind of medical reasons for doing so. And this is a major part of why these New Year diets fail. They simplify foods down to either good or evil, unjustifiably, and we shouldn't be trying to demonize any type of food. Another factor in failure of these type of diets is a reduction in willpower. So as we start these diets, first couple of weeks, willpower's high, you're doing well, and you might have family and friends that are coming along on the journey with you. But as they start to falter themselves, that has a knock-on effect for your own diet adherence. And again, it brings a sense of guilt. But whilst it might sound a little bit cliched, a little what they fancy does you good. You know, if you want to go out and smash a 9-inch pizza all to yourself, there's nothing wrong with doing that every now and again. It's not going to derail your training or your training adaptation in any way. And if anything, it might actually help motivate you to stick to the other 95% healthy eating options that you've made. So these large scale elimination of foods are just not necessary. Okay, so we briefly looked at the culture of these type of New Year diets and the negative impact that they can have both physiologically and psychologically. But as athletes, particularly athletes living in the northern hemisphere, where we don't tend to have particularly good winters, we also need to consider those additional stresses of winter training and how these extreme diets impact and interact with our winter training as well. So winter presents some unique challenges for us as athletes. Firstly, there's a decrease in daylight hours, and with that often comes a reduction in training opportunities, particular for long rides and long runs if we're trying to fit them around other commitments and family, work, etc. So some athletes may subconsciously or inadvertently ramp up exercise intensity during the training sessions a little bit without considering how that impacts on their nutrition. So they may just fuel as if they were going out for that normal long run or ride. So we can get a situation of either undereating or overeating, depending on the circumstances. Excuse me. So, as an example, the weather at the minute in the UK has been pretty rubbish. There's been high winds, we've had heavy rain, and you may have gone out and planned, say, a 4 hour ride, but because of the weather, you've had to swap that and move it indoors and do a turbo session. Now, even for the most hardy of us, 4 hours on a turbo trainer can be pretty mind numbing. So, what we might do is reduce the duration, but increase the intensity a little bit. But again, without considering the impact that has on our fueling. So, it's not a deliberate act, but it does or can have consequences on our fueling, be it under or over. Additionally, we've got the impact of cold exposure. So, cold exposure can negatively affect training, particularly endurance athletes who are spending proportionally more time outdoors. And that's because it forces the body to produce oxygen delivery to the muscles, a faster rate of depletion of energy stores, decrease in muscle efficiency. So even during your, whilst it might still feel easy to you, the body's still having to work harder to maintain thermoregulation and using more energy. And again, this can therefore subsequently lead to underfueling. So, and if this happens over several weeks or months, then it can increase the risk of illness and suppression of immune function. On top of that, certainly from my experience, endurance athletes often underestimate hydration needs in winter. So it's easy to understand in the summer months, we get hot, we sweat more, we need more fluids. But cold exposure can significantly dry out the respiratory airways. And in some cases, that dehydration can be equal to what we see during the summer months. And that ultimately hinders nutrient absorption. Again, it decreases energy levels and performance, and it can also affect cognitive function. So we can already start to see how winter training adds increased stress on top of our normal training load. So, how does these aggressive diets during the new year impact on that? Well, we've just said that undereating is not particularly uncommon in athletes over the winter and off season, but adding to that a period of highly restrictive eating, and then those energy deficits become even greater. And again, that impacts on both the training quality, but also rate of recovery and your ability to get to your next training session fresh. It also elevates hormonal disruption. So things like cortisol, for example, which can impair muscle building and muscle retention, which is often a common training goal during this time of year. That can be compromised, and it also exacerbates what might already be a weakened immune system because of the increased load that winter training in itself places on the body. That hormonal disruption can also result in the downregulation of thyroid activity, which slows metabolism further, which if your goal is to lose any weight, then it makes that weight loss process even more challenging. It slows muscle contractions and also reduces cardiovascular function. And for females, it can interfere with normal menstrual cycles. So while these extreme restrictive diets can lead to these issues at any time of year, we can start to see that for athletes, who are doing a lot of winter training, these negative responses might be even potentially greater because of that additional normal winter training stress. Which brings us on to the importance of gradual change then in eating habits over extreme diet manipulations. So there's loads of longitudinal studies that have been done that show small but consistent dietary improvements over several months tend to yield much better adherence to nutritional changes. And that subsequently has a positive impact on health, wellness, and performance. So that tends to improve rather than suffer, as is often observed during these abrupt dietary overhauls common with your January, New Year type diets. And that's simply because gradual change allows the body to slowly adapt to the physiological changes. So it prevents any nutrient deficiencies, prevents those hormonal imbalances, and probably as important as anything else, it prevents that psychological burnout that is often associated with January New Year's diets. On top of that, gradual change also stimulates longer term behavioral momentum. So, for example, what we can call habit stacking, small little changes added to each other can increase long term diet adherence and performance by around, or training adherence, should I say, rather than performance, by around 60 to 70%. So, as an example, rather than these big drastic changes, start small and then maybe just get into the habit of, say, having a glass of water with your creatine as soon as you wake up in the morning. Now, we're not going to get into whether you should have creatine first thing in the morning, how much, with what, etc. That's just an example. But once you've got that habit in place, it's a small change that doesn't take a huge amount of effort or thought to implement. But once that's in place and becomes second nature, we can start adding other small habits on top. So, again, this time of year, weather's pretty bad. So, another small habit to stack might be to make sure you have your vitamin D. So, while you're waiting for the coffee machine or your kettle to boil for your morning brew, make sure you have your vitamin D. So, whether that's having it there next to the coffee machine or getting it out the night before or whatever it is that works for you, then put that in place. And we just keep adding these small little goals, tips, whatever, on top of each other until ultimately stack up to make long lasting impacts on health and well-being and performance. So, just to finish off with, I did say this was going to be a relatively brief look at winter diets and performance. We'll look at how structured nutrition can support your long term goals. So, rather than treating January as a chance to maybe force weight loss or make big sweeping overhauls to your current eating habits to get maybe back on track after the Christmas period, we need to try and reframe January as an opportunity to focus on doing a little bit of a personal nutrition and training audit. Either ultimately, it's a period to be honest with ourselves and think about what did work the last couple of seasons or what didn't work the last couple of seasons. But also, just as importantly, why did it not work? Why are you having these ongoing dietary challenges or issues? And we can start to gradually address those in a phased manner, not all at once, as we tend to do with these abrupt diets. It's also a good time to start thinking about building these new habits and the habit stacking that I just discussed before. So, small, sustainable changes that you can put into place and stick to. And also focus on maybe putting in a solid winter nutrition plan in place. After all, it's only the end of January. We've still got, unfortunately, a long way to go before the good weather comes back. So now's a good time to start thinking about your winter off-season nutrition in a little bit more detail than you maybe might have done in the past. And this is where professional nutritional support can be useful to some people. very few of us have the luxury of sport being a full-time job, and most of us have work commitments, family commitments, etc. So working with a nutritionist can potentially help reduce some of that burden of doing everything and planning everything yourself, so that you can just focus on the training side of things and whatever other commitments you've got going on. And also there's an element of accountability that comes with that. If someone's willing to invest their time to help you, then you're more likely to stick to it. And again, studies have shown that outside support helps adherence by as much as 50%. So, why nutrition support versus dieting alone then? Well, dieting is often driven by emotions at the roots of it and not science. And for us as athletes, that's often based around trying to get a quick competitive edge over our opponents, or maybe if training hasn't gone to plan, trying to get back up to speed as quick as we can. However, as we've discussed over the last kind of 20 minutes or so, extreme dieting rarely works for athletes and generally is counterproductive. So nutritionists can help track various different inputs. They can track your food logs, training logs, wellness scores, and they can review those and look for trends and how they're impacting your training and recovery in real time. And they can adjust those nutritional targets specific to your needs based on the data that they have rather than on those emotions and possible misbeliefs. So they can objectively evaluate those outcomes of any intervention that they put in place on a regular basis, and then they can make further changes as are needed. They can refine things. So again, it just takes a layer of stress off the athlete that they can then just focus on executing what they're being told, executing the training without having to think about the planning side of it. So to summarize, then, January diets versus long-term nutrition or long-term nutritional support, we need to look beyond those quick fix, one size fits all January diets. As athletes, we need to start thinking more about a personalized, sustainable approach to nutritional changes to support those health goals and performance. As I said right at the start of this, small, consistent changes long term far outweigh any short term perfection every time. And if you can even get 80% of your nutrition right on most days, that's going to beat 100% perfection for only a short period of time. So, say for the whole of January. So, hopefully, that's given you something to consider. Thanks for listening. Apologise for the delay. And if anybody's got any questions, thanks very much.